Quite a few chariots got buffs to their mass in the 3.0 update, and with changes to chariot articulation and knockdown, you would think they're in a pretty good place, but based on some battles I've had, this one and quite a few others, a lot of chariots still seem pretty meh in melee. I mean, they can be good situationally, certainly, but just as kind of a general all-purpose, I would mostly say that you are better off to take cavalry or monstrous infantry, both of which seem very good in this patch. Hopefully chariots will get a little bit more love in the future at some point for certain units. Some units are pretty good, and it should be said any missile chariots are going to be fantastic, as always. But for today, I'm up against Red Salamander here, my patron. Once again, we've got Slaanesh versus Tzeentch, and I'm going to try out the Chaos Chariots here. We've got the Regiment Renowned Sibilant Slaughtercade and regular Chaos Chariot. I've also got my Caster on a chariot here, the Ulorus, of course, on what I have long termed the best chariot for Slaanesh. Single entity, massive, what is this, Exalted Secret Chariot, Perfect Vigor, Devastating Flanker with a fancy new icon. Got Acquiescence and Lash of Slaanesh as well. And then, of course, Chaos Lord of Slaanesh on his chariot. The rest of the army is all infantry with Hell Scourges. Idea here is Hell Scourges now have poison. I decided to just take a mix of them to see how they would perform, more or less. Since this is a patron practice session, we can kind of experiment with some different things and see how they'll do. The poison should be pretty good, and especially for the warriors, they don't pay that much more for it. It does give them a significant amount of survivability in melee, gives them the ability to slow other units down, and just generally they'll act as a better sort of mainline kind of anvil unit, right? And the idea here was to have a lot of anvils and some hammers here with the chariots and magic. Red Salamander coming in with a nice flying force. He's got the Herald of Tzeentch to do some skirmishing up in the sky. Got some blue fire here to potentially snipe out my characters, which he is going to actually go after these chariots first. Do a little side shot there just to check to see how the damage does. Not too impressive, but also got a couple of screamers up in the sky, and the Regiment Renowned Knights of Immolation look very cool. You don't see them super often in the land battles. Can be devastating if used correctly, but yeah, they're going to look fantastic. Anyway, my chariot's charging in the front line here, so let's get to the rest of the build as these two single entity chariots charge straight in. We've got some Forsaken out of the flanks here, some halberds through the main line, and plenty of blues as well, and some pinks. So a nice mix of infantry, some marauders in here as well. So we're just going to deploy the chariots straight in. And I was hoping, you know, Devastating Flanker with the damage spike from the Lore of Slaanesh attribute, we could come in here, get a nice rear charge, and see how it would do against a, you know, a unit that ostensibly should counter the chariots directly, but still, the damage was pretty poor. And this is one thing. Generally, these light chariots just struggle so badly against heavy infantry, and you can now see how they struggle to pull through, resulting in them taking massive damage from the halberds. I will admit this is a pretty unideal circumstance, and like I said, if you use them ideally, they can be much better. We're going to try and get them through. A few of the models die, but single entity chariots, on the other hand, are doing pretty good. I mean, they always have, and especially the Secret Chariot has the ability to just plow through lines, which is pretty excellent, that other chariots just kind of lack. It's not that all chariots necessarily need to be able to plow through all infantry units, but especially on a side or rear charge, should be able to punch through the unit fairly effectively. And you know, of course, the micro aspect of that is to then pull them through on the other side. But right now, the chariots are somewhat disrupting, but the Red Salamander is doing a great job here of countering with the Screamers, who are going to be a very good unit against Slaanesh. I think even better now that Hellstriders have been nerfed once again. Also a beautiful Infernal Gateway unleashed on, like, the Chosen with whips here, which is just going to do a huge amount of value damage to my army. So right off the bat, we're a little bit behind, but maybe with my mobility here, I can bring it back. The biggest thing for me is the flying units. Really, I have not accounted for whatsoever. You know, don't have any, you know, auxiliary Hellstriders or anything like that, or, you know, Seekers or anything. Yeah, and some nice blue fire there, hitting both my character chariots somehow at the same time. But let's see. These chariots, hopefully, I'm thinking, will be able to just continue to do some damage here, and as long as they're not caught out too much by the mobility, it will be okay. But the Knights of Immolation are going to swoop down, and let's see if they can actually stop them up. The Secret Chariot is able to just kind of wheel to the side and get away. Thankfully, the Chaos Lord of Slaanesh should be able to stay out on the move as well, but it looks like he's maybe getting staggered a little bit, and just the mass is enough to kind of keep them held back. But Red Salamander just punishing me heavily with the AoE magic damage of Tzeentch, which is definitely the way to go. I mean, certainly the character sniping, obviously, but against a wide infantry build like what I've brought here, he doesn't have a lot of anti-infantry power outside of his AoE magic, so it makes sense just to dedicate a lot of wins to that. Screamers and other units can certainly be used to counter the chariots, and the Screamers diving, once again, that anti-large magic damage, just so good against any demonic units of Slaanesh, or really any units of Slaanesh, to be honest, because they all have at least some physical resistance, which, you know, on paper actually makes this matchup seem somewhat Tzeentch favored now that I think about it, at least in that specific aspect, but Slaanesh's mobility historically has punished Tzeentch pretty heavily, so anyway, that final transmutation is going to finish off some of my units there, but we'll be able to move in and hopefully just bog down these Screamers in infantry, kind of drag them down, despite the fact that my build's gotten fairly wrecked. The balance of power is fairly well against me. I'm feeling sort of like maybe I can take this out. The only real problem here is that the Knights of Immolation I literally have no answer to, and also that like one more blue fire will probably just finish off the Allures here and cause my build to cascading, you know, chain route, or even just a few shots of the Herald. So, you know, actually looking at things now, definitely completely hopeless. But still, we're going to continue fighting, get some nice cinematics here in the realm of Tzeentch. Very fitting for this Monogods showdown here. It's definitely an interesting one, and I do feel, again, this specific single entity chariot's very good. The other chariots, I don't know, I just feel like they're too situational to justify bringing in most matchups and factions, especially in land battles where, you know, the ability to predict your opponent's build, in certain matchups, you know, they can do different things, right? They can try and missile defend, they can maybe try and kite, try and counter rush. So it can be tough to predict the composition of a lot of factions. So I have a hard time recommending chariots in general. There are a few character chariots especially that I would say are definitely worth it, but yeah, I've been fairly underwhelmed anytime I've tried to take other types of chariots. And we'll probably talk more about that in other videos. I've got some other replays to show you guys, you know, going forward, but this particular one, the chariots, I mean, granted, I deployed them in a, again, somewhat inopportune way, though I would think, yeah, devastating flanker and similar-ish cost. In the case of the Sibilant Slaughtercade, quite a bit more cost than the Chaos Warriors. I was just hoping for a little bit more on that rear charge there. It was pretty limp, to be honest. And yeah, the only one who really performs is the Allures. All the other chariots are more or less failures. The Howl Scourges are decent anvils. The Warriors are probably the most cost-effective ones. I'm not totally sold on the Devoted Marauders, and they were pretty decent. I think as a low-tier unit, they might be the best Devoted Marauders now. I'm not sure. I need to do some testing and see. But in general, these mid-tier ones seem pretty solid overall. The Chosen seem really expensive, but in certain situations, they'll be really tough to kill for some factions. So, I don't know. Maybe you take them in certain matchups. For Red Salamander's side, I mean, fairly solid build overall. I think, you know, against more sensible Slaanesh army, it might need a little bit more kind of counter mobility. But I really like the Tzeentch Forsaken, obviously. The Halberds can be decent for anti-large and defense. Just got to be careful not to get caught out on a rear charge by something that actually has decent armor piercing. But Knights of Immolation also, Slaanesh's flying forces aren't very strong, so these guys can definitely get good usage out of their bomb drops and some good synergy with Warp Flame to get some massive damage. And then the cheap caster actually up in the air also seems like a very solid option against Slaanesh, especially with the tools to screen Furies or potentially, I guess, really the only single entity flying you have for Slaanesh is the Demon Prince, who's pretty good, but I don't know if you would take him here. I don't know about that. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.